Weeks passed during which conjecture raged behind the palace walls. What was Prince Louis's state? And why did the youngest royal vanish from sight? But just 3 minutes ago, King Charles broke the silence with a shocking, depressing statement that has affected people all across the world. The truth is more than just terrible. A deeper royal problem than anyone had expected is revealed. Before we get further into what this actually means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any updates. There was no explanation why it started so softly. There was no trace of a young prince's smile on royal calendars. There were still public appearances. Palace officials originally dismissed it as typical, despite their claims that the child was sleeping. It became difficult to overlook the absence as the days turned into weeks. They all knew something was wrong. Social media took issue with the palace's unwillingness to challenge the hush. A blurred image, a cancelled engagement, an unanswered question, all of these encouraged darker thoughts. Was there something the monarchy was desperately trying to hide? A secret accident? Or a health problem? As the palace stayed silent, the whispers became louder, and then the time had arrived when no one was prepared. Rather than advancing confidently, King Charles seemed to be burdened. His words were slow, measured, and full of emotion. This was not the polished voice of a monarch delivering rehearsed reassurance, he remarked. The grandfather in question was experiencing difficulty speaking. This is not just about a young boy, he said, his voice trailing off. Everything we haven't been able to safeguard is at issue. The difference was created by that one comment, which made it clear that this was more than a minor setback or a passing concern. It wasn't time or privacy that Charles was discussing. He was talking about responsibility, regret, and an all too long ignored reality. Those close to the palace said that the air was heavy. Senior assistants reportedly lowered their eyes when the statement was made, fully aware that this silence had not been an accident. Long before the public began to notice Louis's disappearance, it had been carefully planned out, measured, and ultimately revealed. In private, questions had been asked, early alerts, subtle clues, and concerns that were minimized, delayed, or disregarded in order to maintain normalcy. As the crown moved forward, a fragile object was abandoned. Much attention has also been paid to the roles played by Williams and Catherine. Why is it taking so long? Why endure the strain, the gossip, and the painful speculation? Insiders say that the choice to keep quiet was not made out of the blue. The decision was made out of fear. A fear of being found, a fear of the consequences, and a dread of what might occur if the truth were revealed. And the seeming calmness has disappeared. Now that Charles has finally spoken, the palace has lost control of the story. As it pushes forth, the truth is crying to be heard. But when the king's voice breaks, the entire story begins to fall apart. For her, illness is not the only problem. Treachery lurks beneath the palace's marble exterior. The palace staff was the first to notice that something was wrong. Late-night doctor visits, quiet arguments in the East Wing of Kensington, and a nursery that grew quieter every day. Prince Louis's early years had already been marred by unsettling rumors, and we now understand why. Even in a house accustomed to concealment, Louis Wing's energy had changed in some way. Workers who had before mocked the charisma of the youngest royals now had to exercise caution. The maids paused outside his door for a while. The aides looked at each other, and the footman often returned from that corridor with a timid, pale appearance. It wasn't an illness as we know it. There was fear of what might be discovered, and uncertainty. Catherine had already begun covertly hiring medical professionals who weren't formally on the royal list, even as the public saw joyful family photos taken behind closed doors. These weren't merely health assessments. In total secrecy, away from palace clinics and out of the view of traditional advisors, these demanding developmental evaluations were conducted. Normally so composed, Catherine was obviously exhausted. Royal obligations and emotionally difficult visits with pediatric neurologists took up her days. The reason she refused to tell the media was not embarrassment, but rather a fear of miscommunication. During an afternoon play session, the crucial moment took place. Breathless, one of the helpers rushed to Catherine, to let her know that Louis had fainted. The sudden quiet, which had no apparent cause, bruises or injuries, stunned everyone in the room. The resulting fear hit at once. When a medical team arrived, Louis was brought back to life. But at that moment, things had clearly changed. Catherine, profoundly shaken, called William. For the next 2 weeks, the couple stayed out of the spotlight after departing a state function within an hour. Not every family member was aware, though. Grandfather Charles was not informed of Catherine's choice, even though he frequently attended diplomatic briefings and public appearances. Protection, not cruelty. Camilla was angry, but she needed time. She claimed that after Catherine gave her evasive answers to her repeated inquiries about Louise's whereabouts, she was being too theatrical. This dispute made an already strained family dynamic even more difficult. Palace officials in the meantime activated what is colloquially known as the Royal Privacy Clause, a seldom employed process that forbids media outlets from reporting on certain health-related issues involving famous kids or the elderly. The response to any leaks would be aggressive legal action. This clause made a powerful message when it was suddenly implemented after being dormant for over 20 years. The business didn't want the general public to be aware of any mistakes made, but that merely made people more suspicious. The longer the palace was still, the louder the voices outside grew. As royal doctors look for answers, their discoveries lead to a series of violent fights inside the palace. When King Charles made an effort to unite the family during a trying period, Camilla had other plans. When Camilla's growing influence twisted the truth about Prince Louis's condition, Catherine could no longer bear it, and what had begun as concern swiftly turned into animosity. At first, Camilla seemed to have good intentions behind her involvement. She asked Louis how he was feeling, offered her sympathy, and even suggested a small family gathering to support William and Catherine. Behind the scenes, however, her tone quickly altered. During a private luncheon with top aid officials, Camilla dismissed the growing health concerns as media hysteria and claimed that the press was making money off of silence and panic. Everyone in the palace was shocked when her exact words, "This is just another overblown royal flu," were revealed a few days later. Catherine, already emotionally exhausted, felt utterly duped. It only got worse after that. After Louise was excused due to a health issue, Camilla reportedly invited a few journalists to a major royal charity event. At any rate, wider coverage, greater access to cameras, and Camilla taking center stage with her grandchildren, who were smiling, waving, and talking about the bright future of the monarchy. The final straw for Catherine was this. In her opinion, it was not only rude, but also a premeditated attempt to draw attention away from Louise and onto Camilla's own ancestry. The tension turned into a rare and violent confrontation that took place behind closed doors. Princess Anne, who was deeply worried by the drama that was emerging and absolutely loyal to Catherine, privately challenged Camilla. The conversation, which had begun as caustic, quickly became heated. It seems that Camilla claimed that no one was in favor of the monarchy in response to Anne's charge that she was using a sick child to improve her public image. It got cold in the room 4 days. Those remarks would echo through the corridors of the palace. Cammy resisted Charles' attempts to mediate because he was torn between loyalty and leadership. She insisted that the family was experiencing fear and division as a result of Catherine's unchecked power over media narratives. In addition to pushing Charles to impose more limitations on what may be shared with the public, she suggested that Catherine take over as the crucial media liaison. Though Charles paused, the damage was already done. Additionally, Camilla had begun to advocate behind the scenes for her grandchildren to be given more attention. To make the Parker-Bowles family more visible, a series of press announcements gradually shifted the royal attention to them. They wrote features, uploaded pictures, and even organized educational activities. The action was purposeful, calculated, and completely unrelated to the emotional burden Catherine and William were carrying. For William, a late-night strategy meeting with senior advisors was the turning moment. In a fit of agony and fury, He turned to his father and described Camilla's actions as nothing less than heartless contempt. He tasked her with exploiting the royal position to rewrite historic lines. The food was raw. It was close. The relationship between Charles's current bride and his future king also underwent a sea change. But it wasn't just Camel's deceit that swiftly split their family apart. Another royal would make a disastrous decision out of the blue. Prince Harry decided to divulge the one secret Catherine was afraid would ever be discovered. Prince Lou discussed more than just familial turmoil, a rare interview during his quiet suffering. After identifying identities, he revealed something that surprised King Charles. "It seems like a bad time." Harry's exact and deeply intimate remarks burst like a controlled explosion. He talked carefully and slowly, as if he had been practicing every word for years, as the palace attempted to control the mounting nervousness around Lucy. This was not an uncontrollably angry outburst. For him, at least, it was calculated truth. Prince Louis had been doomed from the start. Harry suggested, not by accident, but by the internal workings of the monarchy. Trends, traditions that put image before action, and warnings ignored, since doing so would mean confronting uncomfortable truths about the royal family, were all topics he covered. He made a catastrophic inference. This didn't happen by accident. Neglect was covered by the procedure. Then the line immobilized the country. Harry claimed that years before, King Charles had been made aware of a genetic issue affecting particular family branches. A possibility, a risk, something that was discussed in private before being placed on hold. Harry asserts that the Crown put continuity ahead of prudence and prestige ahead of responsibility. Charles knew and chose to remain silent, he said. Meghan's silence was short-lived. She promptly repeated Harry's claims, accusing the business of concealing sensitive genetic analyses to keep the public safe. She did not portray it as a royal failing, but as an institutional one. They protect the throne, she said, even if it means sacrificing a child. The words acquired popularity rapidly, evoking both outrage and disbelief. Everything in the palace was so stressful that Catherine fainted. The interview then played once more. More was discovered with each repetition. She felt betrayed by someone she had once trusted, exposed, and caught off guard. There was no problem here. This was combat in public. Catherine is alleged to have secretly sobbed. In addition to the charges, the timing excited her eyes. His misery had now extended over the world, and Louise was still vulnerable and fragile. And now, the monarchy is on the verge of its most precarious situation in decades as the fallout from charges, interviews, and the king's shaky confession settles. Prince Lou's health isn't the only concern anymore. It's about whether the tradition-based institution can withstand transparency and about trust. A woman battled for her son's safety. There was a parent who questioned the system he was born into. One king expressed regret. Additionally, a prince across the ocean started a fire that might never completely go out. The harm extends much beyond the royal walls if Harry's assertions include even a small amount of truth. If they don't, however, the damage caused by those remarks could be quite as severe. In either case, the Crown's own silence is hurting the unity it has worked so hard to maintain. Even though Prince Louis is no longer visible, the conflict around his story is now widely known. Furthermore, what occurs next could change the course of the royal family's history rather than merely making headlines. Because this tale is far from over. Stay with us. Stay with us.